Can Hurts fix it? The news that many Eagles fans has been looking for has arrived. Jalen Hurts officially named the starting quarterback yesterday afternoon by head coach Doug Peterson. With that being said, welcome to the More Than Philly Sports Talk Show. It is great to be here with all of you. It is 11:32 a.m. on the East Coast, and as always, joined alongside my co-host Gavin Toney, who is a little bit busy with a combination of getting our awesome show shared out, finding his credit card so he can get a PlayStation 5 at some point. All I know is it's the 9th of December. We're still about 2 weeks out of Christmas, 15 days to be exact. So I know Gavin's trying to get himself a gift. We're only about 3 days out from Hanukkah. I'm super excited about that. We'll be celebrating every day on here, releasing some of the different gifts we possibly can get. So, in all honesty, it's been a crazy 24 hours. It's been hectic as far as all around, whether it be with the Sixers, with James Harden reportedly wanting out, and then he got tested for coronavirus in Houston, making it like he was possibly going to be able to come in and end up playing for Houston, so that happened. And then, of course, the big news, Jalen Hurts named the starting quarterback over Carson Wentz. It is also possible, I read a report this morning, it is possible that it's possible that Carson Wentz could be inactive for this game. The reason being more of a mental break. So that's at least what I'm interpreting from it. But, Gavin, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, Zach. Listen, for all the people at Target that woke up at 5 in the morning and was able to cop the PlayStation 5 before me, I don't like y'all today, all right? I don't like y'all today, but that's besides the point, Zach. Jalen Hurts is starting, all right? We called for this, Zach. We had an argument yesterday in our class about this. Zach, I know what side you stood on, and you know what side I stand on. But, Zach, it's happening. I don't agree with the team he's going to start against because this team is, especially defensive, they're on a roll. But you're right, it's like 15 days before Christmas. I guess this is our early present. If you're Jalen Hurts, you get to start this week. Zach, we talk about Hanukkah in 3 days. I'm excited for that, and I know you are as well. And I do got something in the mail on its way for you. So be on the lookout for that. But Zach, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. I mean, as to you, Gavin, we'll be doing our gift exchanges, maybe not on the show, but we'll share off, of course. And then again, for those who may have missed yesterday, we are going to possibly do a live stream gingerbread building contest, so stay tuned for that. That should be an exciting thing to do, unveil it, get some voting in, as like when Gavin was voted to lose the mini golf tournament, and I obviously did not deliver the unexpected. I was able to clinch that victory. We are going to have another one as well soon, so we'll be a team this time, going up against some of our friends possibly this week.
First of all, Zach, don't make it seem like I got blown out the water. You hit a home run on the first 3 holes in the front 9, and it was kind of hard to come back after that. So I don't want to hear all of that stuff. But let's get technical real quick. There is going to be another one. All right, it's going to be us two together versus the Whitman Bros. So be on the lookout for that. It's going to be fun.
It's going to be exciting. I think we can pull it off. We'll be doing a scramble there. But other than that, let's get to it, Gavin. Jalen Hurts named the starter against the Saints. There's many different arguments, many different cases for this. Bottom line is you're 3-8-1. You're not going to the playoffs. I'm sorry for those who think we will. But Washington and New York are both pulling ahead. They're both better teams. Why not do it? You know? What do you have to lose? Except everything. Just kidding. But look, on Friday, Gavin, we talked a lot. We had some negativity about the Eagles. You asked me to share something positive. And I shared this. I said the Eagles have their franchise quarterback. And the O-line will fix itself. You just got to build the receiving core differently. You got to do a few different key things there. Do I stand corrected? I don't think so. I'm still confident in number 11. At the same time, I think it was the right move for now. Possibly make him inactive and give him a week off in a way. And then, review film, learn what he can do, especially including navigating the pocket and also for his own safety. We know he's definitely a little bit more of an injury-prone, quote-unquote. I don't believe that. I think anyone who gets hit the way he has would suffer the same level of injuries. But the bottom line is this. You need a spark. Doug Peterson hit it right on the head. I don't like a lot of his decision-making this year. I don't like that he's not been blunt in a way. It seemed like Carson was confused on the sideline about who was going. Like, he's going for a play or he's going for a series, and then he's using it for the rest of the game. It's been poorly managed. Play calling we know has been terrible. We know the O-line is not great this year. So maybe Jalen Hurts can give a little spark there. And receivers can't get open. Those are all problems. Poor quarterback play is part of that. But again, it has not been number one. Gavin, we both agree on that for sure. So here's the question. Is it possible to agree that Hurts can start this week or so, but we can acknowledge that Carson Wentz is still the franchise guy and will be the franchise guy moving forward?
Well, Zach, he's going to be here moving forward, but due to the fact as well, he will be here next year due to the fact that if you cut him, you lose $60 million. If you trade him, you eat $30 million. So Zach, he'll be here next year. Will he be the head guy behind? I don't know. That's but what I do know is this: the era of this whole Howie Roseman and Doug Pearson era that should be over by the end of this year. All right, and the Pennsylvania, all this stuff that we're talking about, I don't know if that's going to be here next year, Zach. I would be lying to you if I said I do know, but I don't. Zach, Carson Wentz has arguably had the worst statistical year ever in the NFL. First in sacks. He got sacked 45 plus times already in 12 games. Zach, that's terrible. And people want to talk about the injury. I never used Carson Wentz. I never used Carson Wentz's injury as a knock towards him because everybody's bodies built differently and some people's bones are more fragile than others. I'm not going to get into that, Zach. Who am I to talk about that? I'm not a doctor, all right? And I don't want to be a doctor. But Zach, here's the thing. Carson Wentz does have some games where it looks like it's on him, and some games it looks like it's on Doug Peterson. But Zach, it would be totally unfair to sit here today and say Carson Wentz is not the franchise guy because he was our franchise guy. But you ever heard the thing, the saying that things change and people change? Was that this is not the same Carson Wentz from 2017, the Super Bowl season, where he had arguably the best talent around him. And you can make a case of saying that, well, his talent around him and the guys around him aren't the healthiest and they haven't been in the last 2 to 3 years. But Zach, he made it work last year with, I want to say, arguably with worse when it comes to wide receiving cores. But this year, you just don't have an offensive line. Zach, you made a great point. Offensive line is going to fix it. So I got that. But I got to think about the inaccuracy. His throws are being inaccurate. I'm not going to pinpoint all the interceptions on him, but some of them are him trying to play hero ball and trying to force into situations that aren't his or that shouldn't. Say that again?
Why do you think that is? Why do you think he's playing hero ball? Why do you think he feels the need to do so?
Well, when you're put in a bad situation by your coaching staff, you have no choice but to play hero ball. When you're holding the ball for too long and you take 10 yards of sack, a third and 15 turns into a third and 20 due to the fact that you lost 10 yards on the previous play. It could have been a second and 10, and now it's a third and 10 because of that. But Zach, I'm not going to sit here and blame Carson Wentz for the full 100. I will say this. Doug Peterson and Howie Roseman has failed this man to get him the best ability of help that he needed. We saw it last year. You need to go get wide receivers. So what do? You don't get him a wide receiver. Honestly, you go get him a wide receiver in Jalen Reagor, who we know damn well wasn't going to be as great as Justin Jefferson. He does have moments, Zach. I'm not going to lie. He looks like he'd be a bright young player, but no, we knew he needed the obvious pick. You don't get DeAndre Hopkins in the trade, nor do you get Stephon Diggs. To make it worse, that they go on the same damn day. But as I digress, Zach, before we can start blaming Carson Wentz for some things, we got to look at the guys that failed him. Doug Peterson for not getting the ball in his hands quick enough, and Howie Roseman for lack of surrounding him with talent. Carson Wentz, we see what Carson Wentz could do with talent. Look at 2017. You had LeGarrette Blount. You had Jay Ajayi. You had a nice young Corey Clement, a motivated one. You had an Austin Jeffrey that looked like he wanted to give a damn and play. Troy Smith was here. Not a lot of people remember that. Troy Smith was here. Trey Burton was here. All right, Zach. We had the pieces of talent, and the defense was good that year, especially in the end of the season. But not a lot of people want to remember the talent he had around him. And then look at last year's talent, Zach. Nelson Aguilar, Dallas Goedert. No sight. Nothing against Dallas Goedert. You talk about, then you go out and you can go say you had yourself a guy in Golden Tate. Golden Tate wasn't, no help either, Zach. But he wasn't here throwing the ball. Zach, the point I'm trying to make to you is we've seen what Carson Wentz could do with talent and with help.
And
now we're seeing what happens when he doesn't have that
run balance.
Help.
I think so for sure. I think the big thing too. I mean,
that too, in the offensive line, Zach, horrible.
All right. So with the Eagles, I mean, we talk about the coaching all the time. People say it's possible for a quarterback to have a bad year, 1 year, but why can't a head coach? Well, it hasn't been 1 year. It's been three. The lack of running the ball, I noticed it 3 years ago, the year after the Super Bowl when they were losing games. Gavin, week one against Washington, you're up 17-0. You only ran the ball 15 times with your running backs, and they averaged 3.5 yards per carry. Why are they doing that?
Because your coach is allergic to the run. Zach, we talk about it every day how Miles Sanders is arguably a top 5 running back, top 10 without even getting the ball, but top 5 if you give him the ball. We've seen what he could do in the backfield. Zach, I don't get the understanding on why when Carson Wentz is under center, you pass 50,000 times, but when and you run the ball a minimum of 8 times. But when somebody like a Nick Foles is behind the line, you run the ball 1,000 times and he throws minimal times. Can we understand that? Are we? Does Carson Wentz have this golden arm that me and you do not know about that is not being attached? Is Doug Peterson brainless and doesn't understand that he needs to run the ball? Because that's what I'm getting at. Miles Sanders has a 70-yard touchdown run versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Zach's Pittsburgh Steelers. Guess what, Zach? They didn't give him the ball after that. You go against Baltimore, right? Miles Sanders had 100 yards on 8 carries. 100 yards on 8 carries. Zach, 8 carries. I know he had one long run and then and everything else, but yeah, 100 yards on 8 carries. And then you stop giving the ball after that.
I don't understand it. I really don't. I think that this is a bad football team. They're coached poorly. But now let's talk about the actual aspect, because the bottom line is that number 2 will be under center on Sunday. What are we going to expect? Are we going to see more creative plays? Are we going to run the ball more? And if so, and they run the ball more, let's say that they find a way to beat the Saints, and it's because they run the ball more. Do you think that people are going to sit here and say that Jalen Hurts is the starter forever? Or do you think that the blunt fact that Doug Peterson is inept to coach Carson Wentz correctly, and for some reason when another quarterback's in, he does it differently? At what point, who do you blame? What do you say at that point?
Well, Zach, my answer for Sunday would be the only difference that you're going to see from Jalen Hurts and the difference between Jalen Hurts and Carson Wentz is this. Jalen Hurts is going to get himself out the pocket more. Jalen Hurts is going to move the pocket himself. Jalen Hurts is going to do a whole bunch of other things to keep, Jalen Hurts is going to do a whole bunch of other things to just keep him going. Zach, what I mean by that is you're going to see him run. He's going to run to the point that defense is going to respect him as a runner, which is going to open up the pass more. And the thing is, Carson Wentz used to be elusive back in 2017 when he was breaking tackles and running. But when that ACL injury hurt, we haven't seen Carson Wentz really take up that much anymore that we used to. So, Zach, that's the only difference you get. But when it comes to play calling, I expect the same thing, Zach. Maybe more running, as you like to point out. But I don't see anything creative coming out of Doug. I can't give you an answer to that because I'm not Doug Peterson. I feel like Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz, there's a disconnect between them.
I don't understand it. I really, genuinely speaking, I don't understand why you subjectify this quarterback in that way. Why do you put him out there to throw 45, 50 times a game? You won't ask that out of Jalen Hurts. What quarterback do you expect to do that? Always getting paid a lot of money. That's fine. But you have a potential running back in that backfield. Do you want to prove your money right, or do you want to win football games? And frankly, they act like they're making that decision with Jalen Hurts, but you have so much talent. So, I mean, Jalen Hurts, I'm an Eagles fan. I'm rooting for you. You have a phenomenal story. I hope you have success. And I hope this coaching staff puts you in the right position. I'd love to see what you can do, whether it's you're the franchise quarterback or it teaches Carson what he has to do or boosts your trade stock or Carson's trade, whatever it is. I want to win football games. I never will wish for failure for anybody. And I hope that Jalen Hurts can make
this
it work.
Comment, Zach, this comment right here. Every time Philly coach decides to call the plays, these are the results. Who do we have as a power that could be on this blocker when the line falls through? I agree with we should run the ball, but I'm convinced you just don't understand it. Zach, we don't have a power back either. We don't.
Howard back.
LeGarrette Blount but Zach, I go back to 2013. Congratulations, by the way, to LeGarrette Blount on retiring. We don't have when LeGarrette Blount was in the red zone, right, Zach? We talk about the red zone efficiency for Carson Wentz. When LeGarrette Blount was back there, all you had to do was hand the ball off to him, and he would give you a couple of yards and ultimately get it in. We know that this offensive line sucks, Zach. It sucks, all right? It sucks, and it's flat awful, and it's going to fix itself. But the thing is this. If you're Doug Peterson and you know that your offensive line sucks, and you know your quarterback is struggling. The lack of getting the ball out of his hands quickly, it's mind blowing to me. You talk about Bruce Arians has to get the ball out of Tom Brady's hands quicker. We know that's what makes Tom Brady great.
And
But
why can't that
what
work?
about you do that up here and get the ball? Exactly. Exactly. It's just lack of coach. This coach is so bad. And for anyone that tries to still defend Doug Pearson with the anyone that tries to defend Doug Pearson with the whole Super Bowl, get out of it. It's over. Oh, and real quick, by the way, Zach. By the way, Zach, real quick, I just want to say one thing. No one's talking about how Jason Peters got benched. He wasn't hurt. He got benched. Let's talk about that.
He played very poor. He's played very poor this year. He has stolen money from us. Respect to the bodyguard, but it was 1 year too late with him. I do want to point out one more thing because there's nothing wrong with criticizing Carson Wentz. It's not illegal in Philadelphia. But this comment is correct. Wentz needs to use all his players and not look for certain ones. He has some trust issues with his receivers. And honestly, I understand it. But at the same time, it is problematic. Jalen Hurts will go in there and will not necessarily say he's going to automatically trust them, but I think there's a possibility that he will go out there and just kind of throw him like, all right, I'm going to give him a position to succeed. Hopefully Carson Wentz sitting down will be able to help him with that. If that happens and he's able to sit down and reboot and maybe he comes back at the end of the year and does something and the O-line gets healthy and you actually go out to acquire some talent, there's a strong possibility that this could become successful. Again, are we trying to figure out right now if Jalen Hurts is the franchise guy, or are we trying to figure out if Carson Wentz can reboot? That's the question. That's up to you, the viewer. And frankly, as of right now, I don't know what to think of this franchise. Personally, I think this is an opportunity for Carson to reboot, but at the same time, I don't know what the franchise is thinking. Because why would you draft a Heisman candidate in the second round as a quarterback when you just paid yours? That was a very bad decision. It messed up the chemistry of this team, and you automatically put Carson Wentz in a position to fail. You could have went out and got Colt McCoy. You could have went out and got Case Keenum. You could have went out and gotten one of these other guys. But no, you decided to use a second-round pick when you could have drafted Denzel Mims or Zach Bond or another guy, and you decided to get yourself a second-round quarterback. What was the logic behind that? Was it with the intention of replacing Carson Wentz? Was it with the intention of using him like Taysom Hill? A second-rounder is too much. Taysom Hill is a sixth-round pick. Look, I don't know what was the intention because it messed up this locker room. You created a quarterback controversy unnecessarily. Worst-case scenario right now, you put Colt McCoy or Case Keenum or whoever you bring in for a game or two. They help out with Carson. Carson recognizes things. He comes back in at the end of the year. There's no controversy there. But look at this. You bring in Jalen Hurts, a young Heisman Trophy potential candidate who played for both Alabama and Oklahoma. You draft him in the second round. You don't surround your quarterback with more talent. Not only do you add another quarterback, but you take away from what you can give this current quarterback. And then you go ahead out and you create this quarterback controversy. But here's the question, Gavin. I'll give you an opportunity to answer it. Why did you draft Jalen Hurts in the second round?
Well, the funny thing is that this question was posed to me by my own father. He asked, "Why would you draft Jalen Hurts in the second round?" And his answer was, and I know he's not here right now, but to answer this question again. But his own answer was, unless there's something about Carson Wentz that they're not telling us medically, and this is after the concussion versus Clowney. But Zach, I'm gonna answer this question myself. I feel like if you're gonna pay someone the contract you did, there was no reason to draft him as high as they drafted Jalen Hurts. Now,
and that's for two reasons.
Carson Wentz is regret.
The first one is that you take away talent. You take away a potential of drafting talent to help your quarterback or team as a whole. And number two, you add a young quarterback who could be considered as a starter versus bringing in Colt McCoy or Case Keenum, who are known as backups. And if they come in for a game or two to let your quarterback refresh and reset, it's not uncommon. Go ahead, Gavin.
Zach, you know what the worst thing that could happen this Sunday if you're Carson Wentz? If Jalen Hurts goes out. Well, hold on, Zach. If Jalen Hurts goes out, not only does he beat the Saints, but he has a great day doing it behind the offensive line that you did. We know the offensive line's not better. But Zach, if you're Carson Wentz, you're hoping Jalen Hurts has a bad day. You are hoping and praying for it. But Zach, that I something tells me about this Sunday is not going to be good for Carson Wentz. I can just tell. I see it right now.
I mean, at that point, what do you want me to say? At that point, there's no answers. There's no defense for Carson Wentz, even though it exists, even though there's justification for it. at that point you're reaching. As an uneducated sports person, which they exist, and again, we know a lot of them, they sit down right now and say Hurts is your future, and get rid of Carson. But what if it's because they run the ball 35 times? What if the defense plays outstanding? Oh, well, they play harder for Jalen Hurts. BS. The only reason that first of all, when we talk about Nick Foles with that, they gave up 23 points to the Rams, 30 points to the Texans. All right, don't act like they played harder for him. No, they didn't. They ran the ball more, and it worked with Carson Wentz last year too. At the end of the year, people were talking about the Eagles beating the Seahawks. People were talking about Carson Wentz not only being better than Deshaun Watson, but Aaron Rodgers. Colin Cowherd on his show last year said that Carson Wentz potentially could dethrone Aaron Rodgers in the top 5. Potentially. And statistically, Carson Wentz has been better. That's the truth. We were talking about that in this offseason. And then the Eagles go out and they draft another quarterback, and then all hell breaks loose. And not only does it have to do with the O-line and the bad play calling, the wide receiving core is not better. At that point, I don't know what to do. If I'm Carson Wentz at that point, I'm like, get me the hell out of here. Get me to Indiana. That's the kind of people. He grew up in the north where it was cold, and his kind of people up there with Frank Wright and T.Y. Hilton there and big tight ends, Jack Doyle and Trey Burton, and that great O-line, that great defense. Oh, my goodness. They won a Super Bowl in 2 years. And then the Eagles fans will be sitting on their hands, realizing they got rid of the wrong guy. It's like, Gavin, the Jimmy Butler or Brett Brown decision. Right now, it's Doug Peterson and Howie Roseman or Carson Wentz. You can't keep both because they're going different directions.
Well, they were going different directions on draft night, as you can tell. Doug Pearson did not look pleased at what Howie Roseman selected at the first pick. But Zach, I want to go back, all right? I want to go back to my unpopular opinion from yesterday when I was talking about, or the other day when I was talking about the majority of the disconnect of, you remember before from the reports that not a lot of people like Wentz, some people like Wentz.
Alshon Jeffrey.
Zach, exactly. You talked about the different going back to Indiana where we grew up from around there in North Dakota. But I want to throw another unpopular opinion out there, Zach. You come to Philadelphia, right? First of all, a total culture shock if you're Carson Wentz, right? All right, culture shock. And then the teammates are predominantly, and I'm just throwing this out there as a hyperbole or as me just talking. Do you think the disconnect from his teammates and him because one, the different beliefs and these guys do, like you got Deshaun Jackson from a different background than what Carson Wentz is. You also got guys like Timmy Jernigan who did some other things that Carson Wentz wouldn't have done. Do you think that's where the disconnect is, that Carson Wentz doesn't connect with the people around him? Because I feel like that could be a problem. Now I'm not talking about the younger guys that we saw last year. I'm not talking about the Miles Sanders and that. I'm talking about the guys that were here before him, the Fletcher Cox, the Brandon Graham, the Malcolm Jenkins, those type of guys.
Well, I mean, just Jackson, there was a tweet yesterday that said, retweet for Jalen Hurts, like for Carson Wentz, and Fletcher Cox did like it. So you have good points, and I understand where you're coming from that North Dakota kid, culture shock into Philly. I mean, I get what you're saying. I do. I understand what your point is. I honestly would sit here and dispute it because, even Orlando Scandrick, who we don't love, he even said Carson Wentz isn't the problem. Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Greg Ward, all these guys love and surround Carson Wentz, especially last year. But you were at a point where you went 11-2 on the fringe of being MVP. You listen to all them mic'd up. You hear all the players on the sideline from all different backgrounds, all different guys, and they're like, oh my gosh, how is he doing this? This is great. All this stuff, the post-game interviews. And then Nick Foles comes in and you win the Super Bowl with him. That's how good the O-line was, how good, I guess, the talent you'd say was around him, how fearless Doug Peterson really was in that Super Bowl with Frank Wright.
But, okay, so let me stop you right there real quick. Sorry to cut you off, Zach. You talk about Nick Foles, right? Nick Foles looked like that he connected with those guys. And the guys I named look like he connected with now. I know
because Carson went 11-2 with them. Carson went 11-2, MVP, right? But then you have a shrine. We had a shrine in your locker room after a couple games with him back. And on top of all of that, you have a statue outside that he has to look at every day coming into work. This franchise set him up to fail from the beginning. At what point connect? I don't understand it. Like, just listen to the mic'd up last year about Carson Wentz talking to these guys. What was it, Hard Knocks or whatever the show was called? I watched it the entire season, and they all stood around Carson Wentz.
Something like that, yeah.
And they all stood around Carson Wentz. They all stood around him, and any of those concerns I had about him in the locker room were disputed last year after watching those videos and watching how this team was around him. Those guys love Carson Wentz. And, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. Because you bring up good points, different backgrounds, maybe harder to connect. but we're listening to a report from Alshon Jeffrey. Does he really look like he wants to be on the field right now? I mean, come on.
Alshon Jeffrey doesn't care. He doesn't care. Why are you here? He doesn't care.
And that's who you're quoting. That's who you're quoting. That's who you're talking about right now with the anonymous sources. That's him. So I mean,
also too. You talk about Alshon Jeffrey. Talk about Howie Roseman, right? Talk about how Howie Roseman gave him $20 million and you can't even cut him because no one wants to, because that's $20 million that you have to eat.
I mean, you bring up good points. There's a possibility of a disconnect, but the indicators point otherwise, and we'll see if we see it on Sunday. But if Jalen Hurts wins out, it's going to be a conversation that has to be had in that front office. I think it's the wrong decision.
If Jalen Hurts wins,
go ahead.
No, I was saying if Jalen Hurts wins this Sunday, Zach, versus a Saints team that's on a roll, it will be a cold day in hell in that Eagles organization, and it will be a day from hell for Carson Wentz if Jalen Hurts wins this Sunday. I'm just going to put it like that.
With that being said, can you acknowledge this franchise has failed him, Carson Wentz?
That there's no doubt about that the franchise has failed him. There's no doubt about that. Now the reports about the whole nobody likes Wentz divided locker room. I believe in that. I don't know to what point, but I'm just gonna say I'll say it again. The disconnect. Remember, you got guys from a whole bunch of backgrounds. Wentz is from a total different background than half these guys on the team. Zach, I wouldn't be surprised. Now you could like somebody on the outside, but on the inside could feel a different way. That's how I feel. I'm not saying Carson Wentz is a bad guy. I'm not saying Carson Wentz, doesn't, is a racial guy or any type of word, anything on that line. Carson Wentz seems like a probably nice guy. All right, I have nothing against Carson Wentz. But the reports about the locker room last year.
All I've heard are good reports about him.
Say that again?
You're right. I mean, all I've heard are good reports.
I mean, it could be.
Go ahead.
It could be good reports, but people's feelings can change. People change, Zach. People can change.
They can. We'll see how it rolls out on Sunday. Again, a lot of interesting decisions to be made for the Eagles. We won't know for the next 5 weeks. We got to see how the season plays out. But we can speculate as long as we can. Coming up after this, another team in the NFC East in a free fall. The Dallas Cowboys fall to the Baltimore Ravens last night. Had some bright spots. Otherwise, not so much. Is Baltimore back in a serious conversation to be a serious contender in the AFC? We'll break that down after this. We are now offering a new product on our Teespring. Wear a mask in public. We are now supporting a custom-designed mask with our logo on it. Purchase it today, and 10% goes to a foundation of our viewers' choice. It offers a full nose and mouth coverage, single-sided print, includes 2 2-inch elastic ear loops, non-medical grade product, and finally, $1 from every mask sale is donated to a nonprofit to feed children in need. Enjoy today's episode. Welcome back here on the More Than Philly Sports Talk Show. For those who missed our last segment, for the last half hour, we broke down the decision for Jalen Hurts to be the starter. With that being said, we broke down opinions. We broke down as far as the locker room. I mean, there's a lot of conversations to be had for this football team moving forward. We won't know until the rest of the season plays out. A lot of things we hit. We try to hit as many as we could.
Zach, real quick before we move on, just put that last comment up right there. It's enough said.
Carson's a great player and individual. He needs proper coaching, and you know what? He might go to Indianapolis or somewhere like that and thrive. But again, there's simply too much information still to be determined on that. And so, I mean, unfortunately, until we see more, as an Eagles fan, I wish for the best for my team. But as a Carson Wentz fan, it's definitely dividing because it's, in my opinion, it's possible to be a Carson Wentz and Jalen Hurts fan because of who they are as well as the organization they're associated with. At the same time, it's definitely difficult to. They diverge. But I want to make sure it's clear that when I talk about this team for the next few weeks, it's nothing against Jalen Hurts. As a matter of fact, he might come in and light it up. I don't know. At the same time, though, I want to keep in mind that my thoughts on Carson Wentz have remained the same. I'm very confident in him, but he needs proper coaching. He needs a mental reset, whatever you want to call it. But that's somehow I see it.
Carson Wentz will be the starter next year, Zach, due to the fact of the money situation. Hopefully, he has a new coach underneath. Now, if Carson Wentz thrives and it does the same thing with a new coach, then we have to revisit this conversation again.
And it depends how this year finishes. If Jalen Hurts finishes out and wins and goes to the playoffs or something, I don't know. It's unlikely to happen, but we're not closing the door. As an Eagles fan, we'll all be rooting for number 2 this Sunday. At least I hope so, because otherwise that's just not what a real Eagles fan would do. So now coming up, the Baltimore Ravens taking a win to move to 7-5, an interesting record to see this year. No one really thought it'd be like this. The playoff picture looking rather interesting right now for the Baltimore Ravens. They're still out of it, something that is probably pretty unthought of at this point in the season with a team that coming off of an MVP season for Lamar Jackson, as well as that defense apparently on paper getting stronger. But look, guys, 9-3 Bills, 8-4 Dolphins, 11-1 Chiefs. Raiders currently have the edge on you at 7-5, 9-3 for the Browns, and of course the Titans and Colts respectively at 8-4. So, I mean, Baltimore looked pretty good last night. It's against Dallas' defense. Take it for what you will. 34 points, pretty impressive. Marquise Brown had a few bright spots. Lamar Jackson only 12 completed passes, 170 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. But on the ground, 94 yards for him. Gus Edwards had a really good night. J.K. Dobbins and Ingram as well, helping out. That's the formula to win. But is that going to be sustainable in the playoffs? It wasn't last year. Gavin, what are some of your thoughts after last night's game and moving forward for Baltimore?
Well, the big question mark, Zach, was can Lamar Jackson pass for the year? He had 2 touchdowns for the year last night. Guess what, Zach? There was no Mark Andrews involved last night. He did it. Now, yeah, give or take, it's the Cowboys defense. We know how the Cowboys defense played this year. On a 4th and 2, and this sums up the Cowboys defense in one play. On a 4th and 2, he needed 2 yards. He gets 30 plus and gets a touchdown. Zach, how bad can you guys be? But Zach, going back to the question on hand. Yes, we saw what happens last year when Lamar Jackson goes down and you can't run the ball. Zach, the Ravens like to control the game through the run game. Why? Because they can control the clock and you can limit the offense to other touches. Zach, if they can get back to what they were last year or a little bit up last year, I don't know if they can get to the Super Bowl, considering the play of the Kansas City Chiefs this year and Baker Mayfield and the Browns will be in. Now, this game coming up this Monday is going to be a big deciding factor for Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. But Zach, when you look at the Ravens and you look at the strong suit, we know the offense isn't there this year. We know that they're banged up offensively and they don't have the wide receiver talent around them. I'm not going to call them bad talent, but there's no true number one right there. So Marquise Brown is a Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is true number one. But Zach, if they can limit the turnovers and keep Lamar Jackson clean, even though he had 1 interception yesterday, but if they can play clean football and run the ball and control, and that defense be better. Because Zach, remember, in that playoff game last year, that defense was ran all over. And if you're Earl Thomas, you were a meme. Zach, the formula for the Ravens is great defense and keep the football clean, meaning don't turn the ball over.
You're right, but that's going to be tricky in the playoffs. Let's name off all the teams right now that are potentially in the playoffs, Gavin. Tell me if you think that they can beat them in a game. We'll start at the top of the list, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Do you think, as healthy as they'll be when they get to the playoffs, that the Ravens can beat the Steelers?
Yes, I can. Zach, we go back to the first meeting. Zach, they were driving down the field with them. They didn't have a timeout, or they had 1 timeout, or correct me if I'm wrong, they had a timeout or 1. They were driving down the field, Lamar Jackson and the Ravens were. They were in, I want to say the 30, and he fumbled. Lamar Jackson fumbled, and when he got inside the 20, ultimately loses the game. But Zach, I'm a firm believer if he doesn't fumble, the Steelers lose the game. They're not what they were. Then you want to go back to this past week without Lamar Jackson. The Steelers almost lost that game too to Trace McSorley and Robert Griffin III. Or if you're me, I like to call him RG3. But Zach, I think they could beat the Steelers if they're fully healthy. And remember, the Steelers are banged up too, and they got exposed versus Washington. So it's going to be interesting to see.
Yeah, right now, based on what it's looking like, if the Steelers drop another game, they will be the 2nd seed. Again, if the Ravens make it, it's probably going to be the 7th. So that might be the wild card matchup to see. Gavin, you say that they can win that game. What about against Kansas City? Do they stand a chance?
I don't believe so. And if they do, it's going to have to be Baltimore's defense shutting down Patrick Mahomes, which that's a tall asking order. You can't do that. There's no stopping Patrick Mahomes, Zach. We've seen it. But like I said, if Ravens could play clean basketball and control the clock and keep Pat Mahomes off the field, they could do it. They could win. I give the Chiefs the upper hand on that one, but don't count them out. Remember, Lamar Jackson versus Patrick Mahomes, round 1. Lamar Jackson in Kansas City, he did a good job versus the game. They did lose, but guess what, Zach? They lost by a little bit. You go back now. Let's fast forward to this year. This year was all out, man. It wasn't pretty for the Ravens, but they did make a respectable loss. But we knew what it was. The defense was a problem in that game in turnovers. You got to play clean football, and and you gotta limit Patrick Mahomes. That's a tall asking order.
All right, how about Las Vegas? You think they could beat the Raiders?
I believe so, Zach. The Raiders almost lost to the Jets, and they imploded in the last 2 weeks. They got lucky on a Hail Mary, a Hail Mary to Henry Ruggs, and the Jets defensive coordinator called a cover zero and blitzed everybody. Zach, the Raiders are nothing too special, especially without Josh Jacobs, and Derek Carr is below average, maybe average some days. Not worried about them. They can beat the Raiders easily.
All right, now what about the Titans, who they've already lost to, and the Indianapolis Colts? Do you think that either one Baltimore could beat?
Well, once again, Zach, it goes back to stopping the running game for the Titans. We saw what happened to Derrick Henry in the past week, 60 yards and a fumble. Didn't look that well. Zach, we go back to Baltimore. I think they only beat Baltimore by, what was it, at the end of the game? The lack of defensive effort due to the fact that they didn't try to tackle nobody. The defense of Baltimore looked tired. Those two games, the Steelers and Titans, they were winnable. All right, it was just came down to Lamar Jackson fumbling versus the Steelers, and it also came to the Titans, the Titans offense is bullying the Baltimore Ravens defense at the end of the game. They could beat the Titans, Zach. The Titans are not what they were last year, too, right? I may add.
I think Titans are better this year, honestly. But you take a look at some of the other games that Baltimore's been playing. All of them, for the most part, I'm not going to call them cakewalks, but the most difficult game coming up is on Monday against Cleveland. That will determine if they make the playoffs or not. Cleveland could also miss the playoffs. They can go 10-6 and miss the playoffs this year. That's how competitive it's going to be. But Gavin, both teams are different since the first time they faced each other. It was not close at all. What do you think about Monday Night Football between the Ravens and the Browns?
This is a must-win game if you're Baltimore, and here's why. The Browns win 10 games and you go to 7-6, it's over. Unless the Browns magically lose, but I think they will have the season series versus you, so it wouldn't even matter. Zach, the key to stopping the Ravens, and I know we're gonna stopping the Browns, so I'll go into detail of this on Monday, but you gotta stop the run game. You gotta make Baker throw, but you gotta be able to cover. Zach, Baker Mayfield is not gonna go for 3 touchdowns every week in the first half, and we know that.
Again, we'll have to see how it rolls out. It's both teams in those games are about controlling the run. Who can stop it? I don't know right now. On Monday, after our recap of the games from the weekend, we'll sit down. We'll take a look at this matchup, and we'll see who we can predict to win. Coming up in our final segment today, the NBA. Interesting news, again, as we mentioned, out of Houston. Some sports journalists around the world are calling for a Simmons and Harden straight-up trade. As Philadelphia fans ourselves, do we like that trade? And would it actually happen? Stay tuned.
Would you like to know how you can support the More Than Philly Sports Talk Show? If so, head down to the comments on our YouTube channel. You will see 2 links there. The first is our Teespring, where you can see a wide variety of apparel products, including our signature product, the More Than Philly Sports Talk Show sweatshirts, offered in a variety of different colors, including gray, navy blue, and more. Finally, we have our Patreon page, where you can become a monthly donation member. 10% of all donations go towards an organization of our viewers' choice. We hope that you enjoyed today's episode, and if you can't donate, that's okay, because you can always share this.
Welcome back here on the More Than Philly Sports Talk for our last segment covering the Ravens and Cowboys, as well as the future for the Ravens. Can they make the playoff push? Go back to that if you're interested in seeing it. But now we're going to break down in our final segment of the day an interesting report coming out yesterday. As we know, James Harden has been reluctant to go to practice up until, again, last night. A lot of moving pieces since we've last been on the show. But let's just go through the storyline. According to sources close to James Harden, he was interested in being traded to Philadelphia or another contender. But this was said weeks ago. The report came out yesterday. It was more formal. Nothing new that we knew. Of course, speculation begins. And then James Harden reported to Houston yesterday he had his coronavirus test. Once that clears, he'll be at training camp. Gavin, 2 questions for you. Number 1, do you think James Harden is going to give it a shot there? And number 2, would you trade Simmons for Harden straight up?
Number 1, I don't see James Harden stepping on the floor at all for the Houston Rockets this year. All right, Steven Silas, who I'm high on, and it's a little unfair for him to finally get a head coaching job after a few years of waiting his turn patiently as an assistant coach to get a job, and you got arguably the best scorer in the league, and he doesn't want to be there. Find it a little ironic, but you still got John Wall, and you still have DeMarcus Cousins there. But Zach, trade for James Harden if you're the Sixers. But here's who you don't give up. You don't give up Ben Simmons. You don't give up Ben, and I know you need to, but Zach, I'd rather get rid of Tobias Harris. I rather get rid of Tobias Harris because if you get rid of Tobias Harris, right, and you put Furkan and maybe Shake Milton, right, and maybe package a pick, right, that's good enough. And you think about it, John Wall could be the head guy there. You got Tobias Harris, a great shooter. You got DeMarcus Cousins. That's just for their side. You can now if you go back here, if the reports are true that Sam Cassell is over here working with Ben Simmons for a jump shot and he can shoot mid ranges, you can run pick and roll with Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons. Come on now. I know you had to trade one of the two, but Daryl Morey said he wanted to keep his young stars. But we know Daryl loves James Harden. And when there's a will, there's a way, Zach. And I think there's a trade to be done, and it's gonna be is like this. The only way you can get rid of James Harden without getting rid of Ben Simmons, or getting James Harden without getting rid of Ben Simmons, is how bad James Harden complains about being in Houston. And if it's to the point where it's a headache and they don't want to hear about it, they'll take Tobias Harris and a few others in the pick. And now if they're waiting for it, then yeah, it will have to be Ben Simmons straight up. But if I'm the Sixers, I might hold out and just wait and see what's going on. You gotta see how James Harden acts, Zach. But I mean, James Harden is a better player, offensive player than Ben Simmons due to his shooting ability. But remember, Ben Simmons is 6'10", can guard 1 through 5, and it should have been Defensive Player of the Year last year. Didn't get it, but it should have been. I don't know. Do you make that trade, Zach? Now let me ask you that. Would you make the trade?
I wouldn't. You have Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Danny Green. You got Tobias Harris and Joel Embiid. That's a pretty good starting lineup. I wouldn't mess with it yet. There's no reason to. I'm sure the James Harden saga will continue into the regular season. So if I'm the Sixers, I sit back and relax right now and let them make offers. Until then, I'm not touching a thing. I want to see how this team works out first. If it turns out, even with some shooters around Simmons, it doesn't work, then yeah, you would want to trade him. But don't speculate on that now. I think it's unfair. I think James Harden will start the year as a Rocket. Again, I like the team they're building there. I think it's for Harden, it's a little selfish. I think I would give it a shot. Both sides equally need to give themselves a shot, an opportunity to see if it's working. Then you're not going to hear another word. But if it isn't working, you better bet that both sides will be in conversations very early in the season. We'll know. We'll know before while there's no All-Star game, there's an All-Star break. We would know before the All-Star break, before the trade deadline for sure.
All-Star break is going to be the last thing. If Zach, they don't move for All-Star break, they're going to hold out. Zach, I don't disagree with you. I think you got to see for both sides. It is a little selfish. James Harden. John Wall is a great complimentary piece. Arguably may be better than Russell Westbrook offensively. Then you still got DeMarcus Cousins who can space the floor. You got Christian Wood. Zach, we went through this yesterday.
Daniel House. Yeah, if
you're the Sixers, there's no. Go ahead.
I'm just saying, I think it's very, very crucial for this team, for Houston, to give it a shot. Like a new coach, new system there, new front office in its entirety. You got to give it an opportunity, Harden. Again, they ran to the Western Conference champion the last 4 years. I mean, how unlucky can you really get with that? So with that being said, on Philadelphia's side, Doc Rivers made it very clear. Daryl Morey made it very clear. That whole front office is in agreement. Nobody's touching those two players, and that's going to stay that way, at least for now. Again, if we go in the season, it doesn't work, there will be changes made. Because right now you have some of the talent to be able to see them work together. You might not go deep and win the championship, but you'll know this year if Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons are able to work together with other shooters on the floor. And you got 3 other guys. You got 4 out of your 5, except for your point guard, that are going to be able to pull it from anywhere. And more importantly, you have Danny Green and Seth Curry, who are going to be able to shoot in tight spaces.
Zach, I got a really bold, hot take, unpopular take, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Between Simmons and Embiid, one of those two guys is gonna finish top 5 in MVP votes. One of these guys are gonna have an MVP season, in my opinion.
I mean, statistically, Daryl Morey says he's going to have the ball in Joel Embiid's hands a lot more than it has been. So, very possible. But how do we have that question? Who's your early MVP pick?
My early MVP pick, Zach. Now, like a long shot, it would have to be Joel Embiid. But in non-long shot terms, I'm going Kevin Durant. Zach, we're not talking about long shot. I'm gonna just talk about the obvious almost. I'm gonna go with Kevin Durant. Coming back off Achilles, Zach, he's not a high flyer, so it's not like Dominique Wilkins back in the day. Kevin Durant's a shooter, and he takes off when he needs to, and he can play defense. He's 7 foot for crying out loud. Zach, Kevin Durant's gonna be MVP this year, but my long shot MVP will most likely be Joel Embiid.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's definitely a interesting long shot. Durant, I can see him up there. Him, Giannis, LeBron, Anthony Davis. I mean, they're all going to be in the conversation for sure. It depends who's going to be that fifth guy. Possibly Luka Doncic. I mean, that's going to be a big caliber too. The Mavericks expect to continue to proceed forward this year. But I mean, that being said, there's a lot of talent on the Sixers team. There's a lot of talent on that Rockets team. The question is who's going to be able to go out there and be able to perform. And so if everything works out in Philly, then there's not going to be any moves. I don't think so, unless it is, like you mentioned, Tobias Harris and a couple other assets that they want to give up for James Harden, assuming that you keep your two superstars, because that's a good future you're building right there. Again, like you mentioned, Ben Simmons, one of the best defensive players in the league. Joel Embiid, top 5 center, best center when he wants to be. I think this year's going to be a good year for them. You got to give them an opportunity to play it out and see what happens.
You gotta give them a chance, at least one ride. You gotta give them one ride each side, and then you revisit in the off season, or you revisit it at All-Star break. But Zach, who's your early long shot pick and your non-long shot pick for MVP this year?
Well, my non-long shot is going to be LeBron James. I think definitely could be a good year for him. Non-long shot. I'm sorry, long shot. Weird, so my non-long shot. This is going to be an interesting one. Hate me for it or not. I got two, actually. I know you'll like one of them. Steph Curry's definitely going to be up there again. But my actual long shot, very long shot, is Paul George. I don't know if he's going to bounce back as ticked off as he might be. But I think, honestly, that might be my Drew Lock dark horse thing. I think Paul George is a dark horse MVP candidate. I don't know right now. I have no reason to believe it, but I have this weird feeling that there's a possibility that he can come back this year and be and go put up MVP numbers again.
Zach, if Paul George wins MVP, I'll buy myself a Paul George jersey. I'll wear it for a straight month. Every show, I'll wear it for a month if he wins MVP. But Steph Curry, listen, Zach, the reason why I didn't put him at long shot because you can't ignore Steph Curry's. Steph Curry's arguably in my top 5 as well. Kevin Durant comes at 1. I think Giannis 2. Then you got to put LeBron 3, Anthony Davis 4, then Steph Curry right there.
We'll have to see how it rolls out. Definitely an interesting one. Again, your long shot, Joel Embiid, mine, Paul George. I'm sure you'll kill me about that throughout the whole season, but you know what? It's something fun that we can definitely have for sure. With that being said, everybody, we hope you enjoyed today's special edition of the More Than Philly Sports Talk Show. We'll be back tomorrow on Thursday. Yes, just one day without football this week, or I guess 2 days technically if you include Friday. But for us, recapping it and reviewing it, just one day this week without it is today. Tomorrow, of course, the Rams and the Patriots, a rematch of Super Bowl 53. Again, everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Gavin, anything else you want to say?
Everybody have a great day, and shout out to my guy Cam. Cam has his podcast, Zach. I'm going to send you to it. It's really good. Really good. You're going to watch it.
Appreciate you watching. Thank you again, everybody. Have a great, great day.
If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't. In addition, hit that bell icon and set it to all to get reminded of when we go live and when we post excerpts of